They say that kindness is a virtue. They say that compassion costs nothing, that mercy flows freely from noble hearts, that the gentle souls among us are protected by fate itself. These are beautiful lies, the kind of lies told to children before they learn the truth about the world, the kind of lies that get people killed. I learned this lesson the hard way. 23 years of survival in a world that measured worth by the strength of your wolf, by the power of your transformation, by your ability to run with the pack under a blood-red moon. And I possessed none of these things. My wolf never came. Not during my first heat at 16, when other young females writhed through their awakening and emerged with golden eyes and savage grace. Not during the initiation trials at 18, when I stood alone in the circle while my peers shifted around us, their bodies flowing like water from human to beast and back again. Not during any of the forced awakening ceremonies my father subjected me to, each one more painful than the last, each one ending with his face twisted in disappointment and shame. I am human-locked, broken, a genetic dead end in a species that worships bloodline above all else. And I have survived this long by learning one simple truth. Kindness is the most dangerous luxury an Omega can afford. My name is Alara, and on the 9th night of the frost moon, I forgot everything I knew about survival. The wind had been screaming for hours. I crouched in my shelter, a structure I had built with my own bleeding hands from the ruins of an abandoned watchtower on the eastern edge of the borderlands. The walls were thick stone, reinforced with timber I had salvaged from a collapsed barn 3 winters ago. The roof was patched with tin sheets I had traded 6 months of preserved herbs to acquire. Every crack was stuffed with moss and clay. Every window shuddered against the coming storm. I had been watching the signs for days. The birds fled south in chaotic, desperate flocks instead of their usual organized formations. The deer moved to lower ground 2 weeks earlier than normal. The creek that ran past my shelter had frozen solid 3 days before it should have, the ice forming so quickly that I barely had time to fill my water containers. And there was a quality to the silence between gusts of wind, a heaviness in the air that pressed against my skin like a living thing. This was not a normal blizzard. This was the kind of storm that came once in 50 years, the kind that killed entire packs caught in the open, the kind that turned the world into a white hell, where even the strongest wolves lost their way and froze to death within sight of safety. I had prepared as best I could. My firewood stores would last 3 weeks if I was careful. My dried herbs hung in neat bundles from the rafters, filling the small space with the scent of lavender and thyme and the bitter undertones of medicinal plants. Preserved meat and hard bread sat in sealed containers near the back wall. Water filled every vessel I owned. If I was lucky, I would survive this storm alone. If I was unlucky, well, at least I would die in a home I had built myself, surrounded by the tools of my trade, owing nothing to anyone. The scratching came at the door just past midnight. At first I thought it was the wind. The blizzard had reached its full fury by then, howling around my shelter like the voices of forgotten gods, shaking the timber frame with each gust. Snow had already piled against the walls high enough to block the lower windows completely. The world beyond my door had become a solid wall of white. But the scratching came again, deliberate, weakening. Then a sound that cut through the storm's fury like a blade through silk. A whimper, low, pained. The kind of sound that comes from a creature who has stopped hoping for salvation and is simply expressing the last of its life force into the uncaring dark. A wolf. Every instinct I had developed over 23 years of survival screamed at me to stay where I was. Wolves did not travel alone during blizzards. Wolves did not seek help from human-locked Omegas who lived in borderland hovels. Wolves who came to your door during a storm were either dying, rabid, or hunting. None of those options ended well for someone like me. I set down the medical text I had been reading and listened. The whimpering continued, growing fainter with each passing moment. I could almost feel the life draining out of whatever lay beyond my door, could almost sense the exact moment when struggling for survival would give way to the peaceful surrender of hypothermia. I should let it happen. Whatever wolf had been foolish enough to get caught in this storm had made its own choice. Its death was not my responsibility. Its pack, wherever they were, had failed to protect it. That failure was theirs to carry, not mine. The whimpering faded to silence. And despite everything I knew, everything I had learned, everything that bitter experience had carved into my bones, I found myself moving toward the door. My mother's voice echoed in my memory. She had been dead for 8 years, taken by a fever that no amount of herbal knowledge could cure, but her words remained as clear as if she were standing beside me now. Compassion is not weakness, Alara. It is the only thing that separates us from the monsters we fear. She had also taught me a riddle, one she repeated so often it became a kind of game between us. What breaks when you speak its name? I never understood the answer until much later. I lifted the heavy wooden bar that secured my door. The wind nearly tore it from my hands the moment I cracked it open, blasting my face with ice crystals that stung like needles. I could barely see 3 feet in front of me. Then I saw him. The wolf was massive, easily twice the size of any I had ever encountered, with fur the color of storm clouds and blood matting his left shoulder in a frozen mass. He had collapsed across my threshold, half in and half out of the blizzard, his breathing coming in shallow gasps that I knew would soon stop entirely. I grabbed his scruff without thinking. He was too heavy to lift, far too large for someone of my size to move under normal circumstances. But there was nothing normal about this night, and I was not about to let a creature die on my doorstep when I had the power to prevent it. I braced my feet against the doorframe and hauled with everything I had. He slid forward 6 inches, then another 6. His eyes fluttered open briefly, glazed with pain and the approaching darkness of death, and met mine. I saw intelligence there. I saw desperation. And I saw something else, something that looked almost like surprise, as if he had not expected anyone to try to save him. "Come on," I hissed through gritted teeth. "Come on, you stubborn beast." I pulled until my muscles screamed, until my hands bled from the rough frozen texture of his fur, until finally, mercifully, his hindquarters cleared the threshold and I could slam the door shut against the howling storm. The sudden silence was deafening. I collapsed against the door, gasping, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The massive wolf lay motionless on my floor, bleeding onto the rough wooden planks I had salvaged and sanded smooth over years of patient work. He was dying, obviously dying, and I had just trapped myself inside a small shelter with a predator who outweighed me by at least 100 pounds. God. "Brilliant, Alara," I muttered to myself. "Absolutely brilliant survival strategy." But I was already moving toward my healing supplies, already assessing his wounds with the clinical detachment my mother had taught me before she died. Deep gash on the shoulder. Not from claws, I realized as I looked closer. From teeth. From the teeth of another wolf, and a powerful one at that. The bite had gone deep, cracking the bone beneath and tearing through muscle in a way that spoke of savage, deliberate violence. This was not a hunting injury. This was not an accident. This wolf had been attacked by his own kind. Blood loss was significant, but not immediately fatal, not if I worked quickly. His body temperature was dropping rapidly from exposure, but his core was still warm enough that I had time to work. His breathing was labored but steady, his heart still fighting even as the rest of his body prepared to surrender. I could work with this. The next hour passed in a blur of motion. I heated water over my fire and used it to clean the wound, washing away the frozen blood and the debris of his desperate journey through the storm. The injury was worse than I had initially thought. The bone was not just cracked but fractured in 2 places, and I would need to set it before I could stitch the flesh closed, or infection would set in within days. I had set bones before, mostly on smaller wolves, strays who had gotten injured during territory disputes or hunting accidents and had no pack healer to treat them. But never on a wolf this size, never on one whose muscles were dense enough to resist my manipulation even when he was unconscious. I worked by firelight and instinct, using techniques my mother had taught me, combined with knowledge I had gathered from every medical text I could barter for over the years. The wolf remained mercifully unconscious throughout the procedure, though his body twitched involuntarily when I finally managed to get the bone aligned properly. I stitched the wound with careful, practiced movements, using thread I had spun myself from the finest fibers I could find. I packed the injury with a paste of yarrow and comfrey, traditional herbs that would reduce swelling and fight infection. I wrapped everything in clean cloth strips and covered his body with every blanket I owned. Then I built up the fire until the shelter was almost uncomfortably warm, and I collapsed into my chair to wait. That was when I heard the second scratching at my door. My blood went cold. I had not even begun to process what I had already done, had not begun to consider the implications of sheltering this massive wolf whose origins I did not know and whose intentions I could not predict. And now there was something else outside, a third scratch, a fourth, a chorus of whimpers and desperate sounds that made my stomach drop and my heart squeeze with something that felt terrifyingly like hope mixed with dread. There were not just one wolf at my door. There were many, perhaps dozens. I stood slowly, my legs trembling with exhaustion and fear. I approached the door with my heart in my throat, every survival instinct I possessed screaming at me to barricade myself inside and wait for the storm to take whatever was out there. This was it. This was how I died. Killed by a pack of dying wolves in a blizzard in a shelter I had built with my own hands because I had been stupid enough to show mercy to a single creature who should have been left to his fate. I lifted the bar, I opened the door, and I saw them. 25 wolves, maybe more, all collapsed in various states of distress in the snow outside my shelter, their bodies half buried by the blizzard that still raged around them. Some were barely moving, their eyes glassy with approaching death. Others had clearly been trying to reach my door when their strength gave out, their muzzles pointed toward the light and warmth that leaked through the cracks in my shutters. They were freezing to death, all of them. I should have closed the door, should have saved myself, should have accepted that I could not possibly help them all, that trying would only exhaust my resources and likely kill me faster. Instead, I looked at those dying wolves, at the desperate hope in the eyes of those still conscious enough to see me, and I made the most foolish decision of my entire life. "All right," I said quietly, to them, to myself, to whatever cruel God was watching this moment unfold. "All right, come on then." I propped the door open with a log from my firewood pile and started dragging wolves inside. One by one, I hauled them across my threshold. Some were unconscious, their bodies limp and heavy as I pulled them by their scruffs. Others were barely aware enough to help, their legs making weak attempts to push against the frozen ground as I guided them toward warmth. The fifth wolf I pulled inside had broken ribs. I could see the damage immediately, the unnatural angle of his chest, the way his breathing came in shallow, pained gasps. Worse, one of the ribs had punctured his lung. I could hear the wet sound of blood filling the cavity, could see the blue tinge spreading across his muzzle as he slowly suffocated from the inside. I had never performed the procedure I needed to perform. I had only read about it in one of my mother's old texts, a description of how field healers during the old wars would relieve pressure from a collapsed lung by creating a small incision between the ribs. It was dangerous. It was invasive. It was the only chance this wolf had to survive the next 10 minutes. I grabbed my sharpest blade, and I made the cut. Blood and air rushed out together, and for one horrible moment I thought I had killed him. But then his chest expanded properly for the first time since I had brought him inside, and his color began to return, and I knew I had bought him at least a few more hours of life. I moved on to the next wolf. The 12th had lost too much blood. I could see it in the pallor of his gums, in the weakness of his pulse, in the way his body had already begun to go cold from the extremities inward. He needed a transfusion, a technique that was considered experimental even among the great pack healers, but that my mother had perfected during her years of practice. I found another wolf whose blood type I could match by scent and instinct, and I performed the transfer using equipment I had fashioned myself from hollow reeds and carefully treated leather tubes. It was crude. It was desperate. It worked. The 19th wolf had been bitten on the throat. The wound was deep but had missed the major vessels by inches, a miracle of luck or divine intervention. I spent 47 stitches closing the tear, while my hands shook with exhaustion and my vision blurred from hours of constant work. The last wolf I dragged inside was the smallest of the group, barely more than a juvenile. He was whimpering as I pulled him across the threshold, tears freezing on his muzzle, his body shaking with fear as much as cold. I wrapped him in my own cloak and set him near the fire, murmuring soft words of comfort that I was not sure he could hear. By the time I had treated the worst of the injuries and ensured that all 25 wolves were at least stable, dawn was beginning to break outside my shuttered windows. The blizzard had finally spent its fury, leaving behind a world transformed into a silent landscape of white. My shelter had become a den of wolves. They filled every available space, their massive bodies packed together for warmth, their breathing creating a strange harmony that filled the air with the rhythm of life preserved against impossible odds. None of them had tried to hurt me. None had growled or snapped or shown any aggression toward the Omega who had pulled them from the jaws of death. They just lay there, watching me with eyes that held something I could not quite name, something that looked almost like gratitude, almost like recognition, as if they knew exactly what I had done and what it had cost me to do it. I had done it. Against all logic, against all sense of self-preservation, I had sheltered 25 freezing wolves through the worst storm I had seen in my entire life. My supplies were depleted. My body was exhausted beyond the point of pain. My hands were raw and bleeding from hours of work in harsh conditions. But they were alive, all of them. I allowed myself one small moment of satisfaction as I collapsed into my chair, too tired to even close my eyes. I had saved them. Whatever came next, whatever consequences my actions might bring, I had saved them. I had no idea I had just saved the Alpha King's entire inner pack. I had no idea that when I opened my door in a few hours, I would find 300 wolves standing outside in perfect military formation, all of them staring at my shelter with an intensity that made the air feel electric. I had no idea that the silver-eyed male standing at the front, the one who looked at me like I was a puzzle he intended to solve, was about to turn my entire world inside out. But I was about to learn. The light that woke me was wrong. After a storm like that, the morning should have been gray and heavy, the sky still pregnant with the clouds that had unleashed such fury during the night. Instead, the light filtering through the cracks in my shutters was brilliant silver, the kind of pure illumination that only came when sunlight reflected off fresh snow under a completely clear sky. I had slept for perhaps 2 hours, and every muscle in my body protested as I tried to sit up. My hands throbbed with a dull, persistent pain that told me the damage from last night's work would take days to fully heal. My eyes felt like they had been packed with sand. But I was awake, and so were the wolves. All 25 of them were watching me, not sleeping, not unconscious, watching with an intensity that sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. The massive storm-gray wolf I had pulled inside first was on his feet, still favoring his injured shoulder, but standing strong. His eyes tracked my every movement with an intelligence that seemed almost human. The others were in various states of recovery. Some had shifted to human form during the night, revealing faces I did not recognize, and bodies marked with the scars of warriors who had seen countless battles. Others remained as wolves, their eyes fixed on me with that same unsettling focus. "Good morning," I said, my voice rough from hours of shouting instructions over the storm. "You all look considerably less dead than you did last night." No one laughed. No one even smiled. They just continued to stare at me as if I had done something far more significant than simply saving their lives. A knock at my door cut through the silence. Not scratching, not whimpering. A knock. Deliberate, measured, unmistakably human in its intention. Every wolf in my shelter went rigid. Some of those in human form reached for weapons I had not noticed before. Others who had been resting began to rise, their bodies tense with sudden alertness. My heart started hammering against my ribs as I stood and approached the door. "Stay calm," the storm-gray wolf said. His voice was deep and rough, the words slightly slurred as if he were not yet used to speaking after spending so long in wolf form. It was the first time any of them had spoken to me. "He will not harm you." "Who will not harm me?" I asked, but I was already lifting the bar, already opening the door. The world outside had transformed overnight. The blizzard had buried everything under 3 feet of pristine snow that glittered in the morning sun like scattered diamonds. The sky was that particular shade of blue that only comes after a storm, clear and sharp and impossibly bright. And standing in front of my shelter, arranged in perfect military formation, were more wolves than I had ever seen in one place. Hundreds of them, maybe 300, all massive, all powerful, all standing in absolute silence as they stared at my small stone dwelling. They wore the black and silver markings of the Northern Pack, the ruling power of the 5 territories, the pack whose alpha king was said to command respect through fear alone. And at the front, having just knocked on my door with a very human hand, stood a man who made every survival instinct I possessed scream at me to run. He was tall, easily 6.5 feet, with shoulders that spoke of violence and victory in equal measure. His hair was black as a raven's wing, pulled back from a face that could have been carved from granite. He wore black leather armor marked with silver insignias, and everything about the way he stood suggested a creature who had never once in his life needed to prove his dominance to anyone. But it was his eyes that froze me in place. Silver, not gray, not pale blue. Silver, like moonlight on water, like the edge of a blade, like something not quite human looking out from behind a human face. They fixed on me with an intensity that made me feel as if I were being seen for the first time in my entire life, and also, perhaps, the last. "You are the Omega who sheltered my inner pack through the blizzard." It was not a question. His voice was deep, carrying the kind of natural authority that made you want to obey before you even understood what was being asked. I swallowed hard. "I am." "And you are the Alpha King," I said, and it came out like an accusation, like a curse, because I knew in that moment exactly who was standing before me. Every rumor, every whispered story, every dark tale told around fires about the ruler of the Northern Pack came crashing through my mind. They said he showed no mercy. They said his pack was bound by blood oaths and brutal loyalty. They said he had razed entire settlements for perceived disrespect. They said his word was law written in the corpses of those who dared refuse him. They said Omegas who caught his attention simply disappeared. "I am," he confirmed. His lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "And you are the Omega who cannot shift, the one who lives alone on the borderlands, the one who, according to my second, pulled 25 of my finest warriors from the storm and saved their lives using nothing but her own 2 hands and a courage that borders on insanity." I did not know how to respond to that. The storm gray wolf was his second, the highest-ranking warrior in his entire pack, and I had stitched his shoulder wound while he lay unconscious on my floor. I was so dead. "I did not know who they were," I said quickly. "I did not know they were yours. They were dying. I just wanted to help." "You saved them," he said simply, as if stating a fact about the weather. Then he did something that made my blood run cold. He dropped to one knee in the snow. Behind him, 300 wolves lowered their heads in perfect unison. The storm gray wolf, his second, limped out of my shelter and positioned himself at the Alpha King's right hand, and I realized with a jolt of shock that this was not just any display of gratitude. This was something far more significant, far more dangerous. "You saved my second's life," the Alpha King said, still on one knee, still looking at me with those unsettling silver eyes. "You saved 24 of my finest warriors. You opened your home to dying wolves in a blizzard when you had every reason to let them perish, when you had every reason to fear what they might do to you if they survived." "Please get up," I said, panic making my voice sharp. "Please. You do not owe me anything. I was just trying to help. I did not want anyone to die." "What is your name, Omega?" The question cut through my protests like a knife. "Elara," I whispered. "My name is Elara." "Elara." He said it like he was tasting it, learning its shape, memorizing it for future use. I am Kalen, he continued, Alpha King of the Northern Pack, Lord of the 5 territories, keeper of the blood oaths. He rose to his feet in one fluid motion, and suddenly he was towering over me again, close enough that I could smell pine and snow and something wild on his skin. And you, Alara, have placed me in an impossible position. My stomach dropped. I do not understand. The blood debt, he said, gesturing to his second, to the wolves still inside my shelter, to the 300 warriors arrayed behind him. By the law of the old ways, when one saves the life of a pack member, that pack owes a debt. When one saves the life of an inner pack wolf, that debt extends to the entire pack. When one saves the life of 25 inner pack wolves, including the second to the Alpha King himself, he paused, and something flickered in those silver eyes. The debt becomes impossible to repay. I do not want payment, I said desperately. I do not want acknowledgement or reward or anything. Just forget it happened. Please, just forget I exist. Forget, he repeated, as if the word were foreign to him. You want me to forget that an Omega, a human-locked Omega living alone on the borderlands, risked her life to save my inner pack, that she worked through the entire night to heal their wounds, that she gave them her blankets, her fire, her supplies, that she asked nothing in return. He leaned closer, and I could not look away from those silver eyes, could not make myself step back or show the fear that was clawing at my throat. Tell me, Alara, do you know what happens to Omegas who catch my attention? The rumors, the disappearances, the stories whispered around fires about Omegas who entered the Northern Keep and were never seen again. I have heard stories, I admitted. My voice was barely audible. What have you heard? That they disappear, that you take them, that you hurt them, that you kill them. I could not make myself say it any louder. Could not make myself accuse the most powerful Alpha in 5 territories of the dark things his enemies claimed he did. He studied me for a long moment, and I could not read his expression. Then, without warning, he threw back his head and laughed. It was a sound like thunder, rich and genuine and completely unexpected. Several of the wolves behind him shifted with what looked like surprise, as if they had not heard their alpha laugh like this in a very long time. "Oh, little healer," he said when he finally stopped, and there was something almost fond in his voice. "You are afraid I'm going to kidnap you, are you not? Afraid I'm going to drag you back to my keep and do terrible things to you?" I could not answer, could not do anything but stand there and wait for whatever came next. "I am not going to hurt you, Alara." His voice was firm, definitive, "and I am not going to force you to do anything against your will." Then his expression shifted, becoming serious again, becoming the face of a king who held the lives of thousands in his hands. "But I am going to offer you a choice, and you are not going to like either option." My hands curled into fists at my sides. "What choice?" "Option 1, he said. "You accept a permanent place in my pack. You come to the Northern Keep as my personal healer, with status equal to my senior advisors. You will have resources beyond anything you have ever known. You will want for nothing, and no one will ever dare to harm you or question your worth again." It sounded like a dream, like everything I had ever been denied, wrapped up in a beautiful package and offered by the most powerful being in 5 territories, which meant it was almost certainly a trap. "And option 2, I asked. His smile was sharp as broken glass. "Option 2, I leave 300 wolves outside your door in perpetual debt service until you accept option 1. They will hunt for you, protect you, follow you everywhere you go. They will make it absolutely impossible for you to continue living the quiet, invisible life you have built here." He paused, letting the implications sink in. "So really, little healer, it is not much of a choice at all." "That is not fair," I said, and hated how my voice shook with the words. "You are not giving me a real option. You are forcing my hand while pretending to offer freedom." "No," he agreed calmly, "it is not fair. But I am not asking you to be fair. I am asking you to be smart." He gestured to the wolves arrayed around us, to the hundreds of warriors who had come to witness this moment. "These wolves owe you their lives, Alara. By pack law, by blood oath, by every tradition that governs our kind, that debt must be honored. You can accept it gracefully and gain everything. Or you can refuse it and lose the only thing you seem to value, your solitude. I looked at the hundreds of wolves surrounding my shelter, all of them watching me with that same unsettling intensity. I looked at my small, safe space, the home I had built with my own hands, the life I had carved out of nothing and isolation. I looked at the Alpha King, whose silver eyes seemed to see straight through every defense I had ever constructed, and I realized he was right. There was no choice. There never had been. "If I come with you," I said slowly, choosing my words with care. "If I accept your offer, what exactly would you expect from me?" Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, that I was negotiating instead of simply refusing or blindly agreeing. "You would serve as healer to my inner pack. You would live in the keep with status equal to my senior advisors. You would have autonomy over your work and your life, with one exception." "What exception?" He stepped closer, and I fought the urge to retreat. "You would be under my personal protection, which means you go nowhere without an escort. You speak to no one outside the pack without my knowledge, and you never, ever put yourself in danger the way you did last night." His voice dropped lower, taking on an intensity that made my breath catch. "I do not lose the wolves I claim, Ilara, not to storms, not to battles, not to their own foolish compassion. If you become mine, you stay mine. Do you understand what I am telling you? Become mine." The word sent a shiver through me that was not entirely fear. "And if I refuse?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Then I hope you enjoy company, little healer, because 300 wolves are about to become your permanent shadows." I looked at my shelter one last time, at the life I had built, at the safety I had created, at the obscurity that had kept me alive this long. Then I looked at the Alpha King, who was offering me everything I had never dared to want, and asking for my freedom in return. I thought about the storm gray wolf, his second, whose shoulder I had stitched without knowing who he was. I thought about the 24 other wolves who had trusted me with their lives during the longest night of my existence. I thought about how I had spent every single day of my 23 years being told I was worthless, broken, disposable. And I thought about how for one night, just one night, I had been necessary, essential, enough. "I need 3 days," I said, "to settle my affairs, to say goodbye." I gestured vaguely at the borderlands, at the empty landscape that had been my home. "To what?" Kaelin asked. The question was not cruel, merely curious. "What exactly do you have here that requires farewell?" "Nothing. I had no friends, no family who would mourn my leaving. My father had stopped claiming me as his daughter years ago, and my half-sisters looked at me like I was a stain on the family name whenever our paths crossed. But I needed time. Time to process what was happening. Time to prepare myself. Time to convince myself I was not making the worst mistake of my life. "I need time," I said simply, "to be ready." Kaelin studied me for a long moment, his silver eyes weighing and measuring in ways I could not begin to understand. Then he nodded. 3 days, he agreed. "My second will remain here with 24 guards to ensure your safety during that time. When I return, I expect your answer to be yes. I do not need 24 guards. I do not even need one. You have them anyway." His tone made it clear this was not negotiable. "Consider it a preview of what life under my protection looks like." Before I could argue further, he turned and addressed his second. "Ronan, see to her needs, ensure she has everything she requires, and make certain she understands exactly what she is agreeing to before I return." The storm gray wolf, Ronan, inclined his head in acknowledgement. "Yes, Alpha." Kaelin turned back to me one final time. His silver eyes held mine, and something passed between us that I could not name. A recognition, a challenge, a promise of things to come. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for saving them, for being brave enough to open your door when you had every reason to keep it closed." Then, before I could respond, he shifted. It happened so fast I could not track the transformation. One moment there was a man standing before me. The next, there was the largest wolf I had ever seen, black as midnight, with those same silver eyes staring out from a predator's face. He was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, a creature of legend made flesh and fur and raw power. He turned and ran, and the massive pack followed him, a river of darkness flowing through the pristine snow, heading north toward whatever fate awaited me at the end of 3 short days. Ronan stood beside me as we watched them go. "Well," he said, breaking the silence that had fallen in their wake, "this should be interesting." "I have made a terrible mistake," I said. His scarred face split into a grin. "Oh, absolutely you have. But do not worry, little healer. We will make sure you survive it." Somehow, that was not as comforting as he seemed to think it was. The first day of my waiting period began with an argument. Ronan had decided, without consulting me, that all 24 remaining inner pack wolves would take shifts patrolling a perimeter around my shelter. He was organizing them into rotations and assigning positions when I emerged from my door to find my small, quiet homestead transformed into something resembling a military encampment. "You cannot possibly think all of you are staying," I said, watching as massive wolves took up positions in a wide circle around my home. "There is barely enough room inside for 5, let alone 24. "We are not staying inside," Ronan replied. His gray eyes gleamed with barely suppressed amusement at my outrage. "We are staying close. There is a difference. This is ridiculous. This is pack law." He turned to face me fully, and despite his easy demeanor, there was steel underneath. "You saved our lives, Alara. Every single one of us would be frozen corpses right now if not for you. Do you really think we are going to let you out of our sight after that?" I wanted to argue, wanted to point out that I had survived alone for years without needing protection, that I was perfectly capable of taking care of myself, that their presence here was suffocating rather than comforting. But the words died in my throat when I saw how the other wolves were looking at me, not with pity or contempt like I was used to, with something that looked almost like reverence. It made my skin crawl in ways I could not explain. "Fine," I muttered. "But stay outside. I need space to think." Ronan's expression softened slightly. 3 days, little healer. Then everything changes. Use them wisely." He shifted into his wolf form and joined the others in their patrol, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts and a growing certainty that I had just traded one kind of cage for another. The first day, I tried to maintain my normal routine. I checked my remaining supplies, inventoried the herbs that had survived the night's chaos, assessed what I would need to bring and what I could leave behind. I made lists with meticulous care, forcing my mind to focus on practical matters instead of the impossible situation I found myself in. By mid-afternoon, I could not stand it anymore. I grabbed my gathering basket and pushed open my door. "I need to collect some plants before the snow buries them completely," I announced to no one in particular. "I'm going to the eastern ridge." Ronan appeared at my side so quickly I startled. He had shifted back to human form, and I noticed for the first time how young he actually was. Mid-20s perhaps, with a wicked scar across his left cheekbone that matched the wound I had stitched on his shoulder. "I will accompany you," he said. "I do not need an escort. Humor me." His tone made it clear this was not a request. We walked in silence through the snow-covered forest, my smaller footprints dwarfed by his larger ones as I searched for the winter-hardy plants I needed. He followed a few steps behind like a well-trained shadow, never crowding, but never letting me get too far ahead. After an hour of this awkward dance, I finally snapped. "Why are you really here?" I demanded, spinning to face him. "And do not tell me it is about pack law or blood debt. Your Alpha King could have thanked me and left. Instead, he is essentially conscripting me into his pack and leaving his entire inner guard to watch my every move. Why?" Ronan studied me for a long moment, his scarred face thoughtful. "You really do not understand what you did, do you? I pulled some wolves out of a storm." "It is not." "You pulled the Alpha King's inner pack out of a storm," he interrupted. "Do you know what we were doing in the borderlands during a blizzard, Alara? Do you know why we were there?" I shook my head. "We were hunting traitors." His voice went hard, all traces of amusement vanishing. 3 packs in the Southern Territories have been organizing a rebellion. They want to overthrow Kalen, fracture the alliance he has built, return to the old ways. The ways where might makes right. The ways where Omegas like you are property, not people. He took a step closer. We tracked them to a compound near the southern border. The battle went badly. We were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. When the blizzard hit, we were separated from the main force. We should have died. Every single one of us should be frozen corpses right now. My mouth went dry. But you are not. No, we are not. Because a human-locked Omega took one look at dying wolves and decided we were worth saving. His smile was fierce now, the expression of a warrior who had stared death in the face and somehow survived. Do you know what that makes you, little healer? It makes you dangerous. It makes you valuable. It makes you exactly the kind of person Kalen needs in his pack. I am not dangerous, I protested. I am just a healer who made a foolish choice. You are, though, he said quietly. You are dangerous in the way that matters most. You act on compassion instead of calculation. You see worth in broken things. You choose to help when walking away would be easier. He paused, and something shifted in his expression. You are broken in the same way he is, he said. You just do not know it yet. The words sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the cold wind. What do you mean? I asked. Ronan was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with memories he rarely shared. I was a slave once, he said, before Kalen took power. His father kept hundreds of us in chains, wolves who had been captured in territorial disputes, Omegas who had no pack to protect them, criminals who had been sold to pay their debts. He touched the scar on his cheekbone. This was a gift from one of the overseers. I made the mistake of looking him in the eye. I had known slavery existed in some of the more traditional packs, but hearing Ronan speak of it with such casual familiarity made my stomach turn. What happened? I asked quietly. Kalen happened. Ronan's expression softened. When he became Alpha King, the first thing he did was free every slave in the territory, not just in the keep. Every pack under his rule, hundreds of wolves, given their lives back in a single decree. He paused. I could have left. Most of the others did. They scattered to the 4 winds, trying to forget everything they had endured. But I stayed. Why? Because Kalen did not just free us, Ronan said. He apologized. On behalf of his father, on behalf of the entire pack, he knelt before us and apologized for what we had suffered. His gray eyes met mine. Do you know how rare that is? An Alpha King, kneeling before slaves, admitting that his own blood had committed atrocities. I shook my head slowly. That is why I serve him, Ronan continued. Not because he commands my loyalty, because he earned it. Because he looked at wolves who had been treated as less than animals and saw people worth saving. He smiled slightly. Sound familiar? The parallel hit me like a physical blow. Kalen had seen value in broken things long before he met me. He had built his entire reign on the principle that worth was not determined by birth or power or the ability to shift. I was not special. I was simply the latest in a long line of wolves he had chosen to save, and somehow that made everything feel more real. We should head back, Ronan said. It is getting dark. We walked back to my shelter in silence, but his words echoed in my head long after the sun set. You are broken in the same way he is. What did that mean? The Alpha King was powerful, feared, respected. I was none of those things. We had nothing in common, except he had knelt in the snow for me, had offered me status and protection when he could have simply taken what he wanted by force, had looked at me with those silver eyes like I was something more than the worthless Omega everyone else saw. The second day, my past came calling. I was outside checking on the wolves' makeshift camp, ensuring that none of them had developed complications from their injuries when I saw them approaching. 5 female wolves from the settlement, walking with the careful neutrality of people entering hostile territory. And leading them was Celeste, my half-sister. She was beautiful, as always. Perfect golden hair, perfect features, perfect shifting ability that had manifested at exactly the right age. everything I was not, everything our father had wanted. She stopped a respectful distance from Ronan's perimeter, her perfect face arranged in an expression of concern that did not reach her eyes. "Ilara," she called out, "we heard about what happened with the Alpha King. We wanted to make sure you were all right." "No, you did not," I thought. "You want to know what advantage I might have gained, what this situation means for your own position in the settlement's hierarchy." But I walked over anyway, because some habits were too deeply ingrained to break. "I am fine," I said. "Thank you for your concern." "Is it true?" asked one of the younger females. Her eyes were wide with something between fear and fascination. "Is the Alpha King really taking you to the Northern Keep?" "He has offered me a position as pack healer," I replied carefully. "A position?" Celeste's lip curled with familiar contempt. "How generous of him. And what did you have to promise in return, sister?" "Nothing. I saved his inner pack during the blizzard. This is how he is choosing to honor that debt, by dragging you away from your home. How romantic." She stepped closer, and I could see the real emotion underneath her polished exterior now. Jealousy, raw and bitter and barely contained. "You have always been strange, Ilara, always choosing herbs and healing over finding a proper mate, always living out here like an exile when you could have tried to integrate. And now somehow, impossibly, you have caught the attention of the most powerful alpha in 5 territories." She laughed, and it was a cruel sound. "I wonder how long it will take before he realizes his mistake." The words stung. They always did, no matter how many times I heard them. But I had spent too many years letting Celeste's cruelty define my worth. "Perhaps he already knows exactly what I am," I said quietly. "Perhaps that is precisely why he wants me." Celeste's expression flickered with something I could not read. For a moment, she almost looked uncertain. "That is enough." Ronan's voice cut through the clearing like a blade. He had moved between us without my noticing, his body language radiating pure threat. "You will speak to the future pack healer with respect," he said quietly, "or you will leave. Now." Celeste paled. She had not expected interference, had not anticipated that anyone would actually defend me. "I did not mean any offense," she started. "Yes," Ronan interrupted, "you did." He looked at each of the females in turn, and whatever they saw in his expression made them all take a step back. "Let me make something absolutely clear," he said. "Ilara is under the Alpha King's personal protection. Any insult to her is an insult to him. Any harm done to her will be answered with the full force of the Northern Pack." His smile was all teeth, and any Omega who thinks she is somehow less because she cannot shift should remember that she accomplished more in one night than any of you have in your entire lives. The females fled, all except Celeste, who stood there for one more moment, her expression twisted with something I could not quite name. Then she turned and walked away. But just before she disappeared from view, she dropped something in the snow. I walked over and picked it up after she was gone. It was a small carved wooden box, my mother's box, the one she had used to store her most precious herbs, the one that had disappeared after her death, that I had assumed my father had thrown away. Celeste had kept it all these years. I stood there in the snow, holding my mother's box, and I did not know whether to cry or laugh. My sister had spent years treating me like worthless garbage, and yet she had saved this one small piece of our mother's legacy. Maybe people were more complicated than I gave them credit for, or maybe she had just wanted to remind me of everything I had lost. Either way, I took the box inside and set it carefully beside my other supplies. Whatever Celeste's reasons, I had my mother's box back. That was something. That was enough. The 3rd day, the Alpha King returned. He came alone this time, walking through the forest with the kind of confident grace that suggested he had never once in his life needed a pack for protection. He was in human form again, dressed in the same black leather and silver insignia, and those silver eyes found me immediately where I sat outside my shelter doing a final inventory of my supplies. "Walk with me," he said. Not quite a question, not quite a command, something in between. I stood and followed him into the trees, very aware of Ronan and the other wolves watching us go but making no move to follow. This was apparently a conversation meant to be private. We walked for several minutes in silence before Kalen finally spoke. "You have been thinking." It was not a question. I wondered how he knew. "My half-sister came to visit yesterday," I admitted. "She reminded me of some truths I had been trying to forget." "What truths?" "That I am different, that I have always been different, that no matter where I go or what I do, there will always be people who see me as less." I kept my eyes on the snow-covered ground, "that I am fooling myself if I think any of this is more than obligation on your part." Kalen stopped walking. "Look at me, Alara." I did not want to, but something in his voice made it impossible to refuse. I raised my eyes to meet his, and the intensity I found there stole my breath. "I am going to tell you something," he said quietly, "and I need you to really hear it. Can you do that?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "You are not less." He said it with the same matter-of-fact certainty he had used when stating his name. "You are inconvenient to a society that measures worth by power and defines value by the ability to shift. But that society is wrong. That society has always been wrong." He took a step closer. "I have commanded packs for 15 years. I have led battles, negotiated treaties, executed traitors, and built an alliance that spans 5 territories. I have seen strength in 1,000 different forms. And what you did 3 nights ago, opening your door to dying wolves when you had every reason to fear us, to let us perish, to protect yourself at our expense, that took more courage than any battle I have ever fought." "You do not understand," I whispered. "I am not brave. I am not strong. I am just different in ways that make me do things others would not." "Good," he said. "So am I." I stared at him. "What?" "My father was a tyrant." His voice went flat with old pain. "He ruled through fear, through violence, through the systematic brutalization of anyone he perceived as weak. Omegas were property in his pack, disposable, less than nothing." He paused, and I saw something flicker in those silver eyes, something that looked almost like the ghost of a traumatized child. "When I took power 15 years ago, I swore I would build something different. A pack where strength came from loyalty, not terror. Where Omegas had autonomy and protection. Where being born without a shift did not mean being born worthless." My chest tightened. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I need you to understand why I cannot let you go." He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "You represent everything I have been trying to build for 15 years. An Omega who saved lives not because she was ordered to, not because she hoped for reward, but because she could not do anything else, because her compassion was stronger than her survival instinct." He reached out and tilted my chin up, forcing me to hold his gaze. "You are not convenient, Alara. You are essential. And if you join my pack, it will not be out of obligation or debt. It will be because I have spent 15 years looking for someone exactly like you, and I am not fool enough to let you slip away now that I have found you." The words crashed over me like a wave. I could not breathe, could not think, could not process what he was saying or what it might mean. "I do not understand," I managed. "You will." He released my chin but did not step back. 3 days ago, you opened your door to dying wolves. Tomorrow I am asking you to walk through mine, not as payment of a debt, not as an obligation, but as a choice. My pack needs a healer who sees value in broken things, and I need someone who is not afraid of monsters. "I am afraid," I whispered. "I am terrified of everything you are offering." "Good." His smile was almost gentle. "Fear means you are smart enough to understand the stakes, but the question is not whether you are afraid, little healer. The question is whether you are brave enough to come anyway." We stood there in the snow-covered forest, the Alpha King and the broken Omega, and I felt the weight of choice settling over me like a physical thing. I could stay here, in my small, safe shelter, in my quiet, invisible life, alone. Or I could walk through his door, into the unknown, into danger and possibility, and a future I could not begin to predict. "I need you to promise me something," I said finally. "Name it. If I come with you, if I join your pack, you have to promise me autonomy, Real autonomy, not just pretty words about protection and status. I need to know that I am making this choice for myself, not because you are giving me no other option. Kalen studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. You will have autonomy over your work, your quarters, and your life within the keep. You will answer to no one but me, and I will never command you to do anything that violates your conscience or your calling as a healer. He paused. But I will not compromise on your safety. Escorts, guards, protection. Those are non-negotiable. It was more than I had expected, more than I had dared to hope for. All right, I said. All right, I will come with you. Just like that, just like that. I met his silver eyes and felt something shift in my chest, something that felt almost like hope. You said you need someone who is not afraid of monsters. Maybe I need someone who is not afraid of broken things. Kalen's smile could have lit the entire forest. Then we have an accord, little healer. Tomorrow at dawn, your new life begins. He turned and walked back toward my shelter, and I followed, my heart pounding with equal parts terror and anticipation. Tomorrow everything would change. I just hoped I was strong enough to survive it. The northern keep rose from the mountains like a creature of stone and shadow, its walls carved directly into the living rock of the peaks themselves. I had heard stories of this place my entire life, tales of its impenetrable defenses, its 1,000 rooms, its dungeons where enemies of the pack disappeared and were never seen again. But no story had prepared me for the reality of seeing it with my own eyes. We had traveled for 2 days through frozen wilderness, stopping only once at a watchtower garrison to rest and resupply. Ronan had stayed close throughout the journey, pointing out landmarks and sharing information about the territory we crossed. The other inner pack wolves had formed a protective formation around us, their massive bodies creating a living barrier against any threat that might emerge from the snow-covered forests. I had ridden on Ronan's back for most of the journey, my body pressed against his warm fur, as we moved at speeds I could never have matched on foot. It should have been terrifying. Instead, I found myself gradually relaxing into the rhythm of his movement, learning to anticipate the subtle shifts of his weight as he navigated the terrain. By the time we crested the final ridge and the keep came into view, I had almost forgotten to be afraid. Almost. The fortress sprawled across 3 separate peaks, connected by massive stone bridges that arched over chasms so deep I could not see their bottoms. Watchtowers rose at intervals along the walls, their windows glowing with firelight, even in the middle of the day. Banners bearing the Northern Pack's insignia snapped in the wind, silver wolves on fields of black, their eyes seeming to follow our approach. And at the center of it all, carved into the largest peak, was the main keep itself, a structure of such size and grandeur that it made everything I had ever known seem small and insignificant in comparison. Home, Kalen said. He had been riding at the front of our formation, his massive black wolf form leading the way. But now he shifted back to human, falling into step beside Ronan as we approached the main gates. What do you think? I think I am severely underprepared for this. His laugh was warm. You will do fine, little healer. Come. There are people you need to meet. The gates opened as we approached, revealing a massive courtyard filled with wolves. Hundreds of them, all wearing the black and silver of the Northern Pack, all turning to stare as their alpha king entered with an unknown Omega at his side. I could feel their assessment like a physical weight, their eyes taking in my simple clothes, my lack of obvious status, the way I sat on the back of the second rather than walking on my own feet. I saw curiosity in some faces, suspicion in others, and in more than a few, barely concealed contempt. An Omega. The whisper rippled through the crowd. He brought an Omega. Kalen ignored the murmurs. He cut straight through the courtyard, with the easy confidence of a man who had never once in his life needed to prove his authority, and the crowd parted before him like water before the prow of a ship. I followed in his wake, my heart hammering against my ribs. We entered the main keep through enormous wooden doors carved with scenes of ancient battles. The interior was beautiful in a severe martial way, soaring ceilings supported by massive timber beams, tapestries depicting pack history in threads of gold and silver, fires burning in hearths large enough to roast entire deer. But there was also an undercurrent of something else, a tension that hummed beneath the surface. Wolves watched us pass with expressions that shifted too quickly for me to read, their eyes calculating, measuring, deciding whether I was a threat or an opportunity. This was not just a home, this was a court. And courts, I knew from the stories my mother had told, were dangerous places for those who did not know how to play their games. Kaylin led me through a maze of corridors and up several flights of stairs until we finally stopped before a set of double doors on what I assumed was one of the upper levels. "Your quarters," he said, pushing them open. I stepped inside and froze. The room was larger than my entire shelter had been, a main living area with comfortable furniture arranged around a massive fireplace, a separate sleeping chamber visible through an archway, tall windows overlooking the mountains, and along one wall, floor-to-ceiling shelves already stocked with books and medical supplies. "This is too much," I said faintly. "This is appropriate for your position," Kaylin replied. He moved to the windows, looking out over his territory. "Your healing room is 2 doors down, fully equipped and connected to the main infirmary. You will have assistants if you want them. Autonomy to run things as you see fit." He turned back to me. "And before you argue, yes, you have earned this. Yes, you belong here. And no, I will not accept any protests about it being too much. There is a formal dinner tonight," he continued. "The senior pack members will be there. My advisors, the inner pack, some visiting dignitaries from allied territories." My stomach dropped. A formal dinner, with powerful wolves who would be watching my every move. 20, actually, Kaylin said, apparently reading my expression. Small, intimate, just the leadership. His smile held a hint of something that might have been amusement. "Consider it your official welcome to court. I do not know how to navigate court politics," I said. "Then you will learn quickly." He sobered. "I will not lie to you, Alara. Tonight will be difficult. Some of my advisors still believe in the old ways. They think Omegas should be seen and not heard. They think your presence here undermines pack hierarchy." He moved closer, his silver eyes intense. "They will test you, question you, try to find weaknesses, but you do not have to prove yourself to them. You do not have to defend your position. You simply have to be yourself. The same Omega who opened her door to dying wolves because it was the right thing to do. Can you do that?" I thought about my shelter, about the choice I had made during the blizzard, about the fact that I had somehow survived this long by being exactly who I was, even when everyone told me I should be someone else. "Yes," I said. "I can do that." "Good." Kaylin's smile was approving. "Dinner is at sunset. Someone will come to escort you. Until then, rest, explore your quarters, get comfortable." He paused at the door. "And Alara, thank you for being brave enough to come here, for giving my vision a chance." Then he was gone, leaving me alone in quarters far too grand for a broken Omega, with a formal dinner looming and no idea how to survive what was coming. I spent the afternoon exploring. My quarters were connected to a private bathing room with heated water and soaps that smelled of lavender and pine. I took advantage of the luxury, washing away days of travel and trying to prepare myself mentally for the evening ahead. Someone had left clothes in the wardrobe, several dresses in rich fabrics, all in deep blues and silvers that matched the cloak Kaylin had given me before we left the borderlands. I chose the simplest one, a midnight blue gown with silver embroidery at the cuffs and collar. It fit perfectly, which suggested someone had been paying very close attention to my measurements. I was just finishing braiding my hair when a knock came at my door. "Come in," I called, expecting a servant. Instead, a female wolf entered. She was tall and elegant, with auburn hair and sharp green eyes that assessed me in one sweeping glance. She wore the black and silver of the Northern Pack, and her bearing suggested high rank. "You are the Omega," she said without preamble. "I am Alara," I corrected, lifting my chin. "And you are." A slight smile curved her lips. "Direct. I like that." She moved further into the room, her gaze taking in everything with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to reading situations quickly. "I am Mira," she said, her green eyes studying me with an intensity that felt almost maternal. "The Alpha King's senior advisor, head of his council." She paused, and something flickered across her face. An old pain, perhaps, a memory she had not intended to reveal. "I have known Kalen since he was a child," she added quietly. "I was there when he became the man he is today, and I will do whatever is necessary to protect what he has built." There was weight in those words, a history I did not yet understand, but I filed it away, sensing that Mira's connection to Kalen ran deeper than simple political loyalty. She settled into a chair across from me, crossing her legs with casual grace. "I am here to escort you to dinner and give you some advice that might keep you alive." How comforting. "I am not here to comfort you." Her green eyes were sharp. "I am here because Kalen asked me to help you navigate tonight, and I owe him enough loyalty to try." She paused, studying my face. "But let me be clear about something. I do not understand why you are here. I do not understand what Kalen sees in an Omega who cannot shift. And I certainly do not understand why he is giving you status that took the rest of us decades to earn." Her honesty was brutal, and oddly refreshing. "I saved his inner pack during the blizzard," I said steadily. "That is why I am here." "So I heard." Mira leaned forward, her expression intent. "Here is what you need to understand, Alara. The Northern Pack is not like other packs. We do not operate on simple dominance hierarchies. We operate on competence, loyalty, and results. Kalen has spent 15 years building this structure, fighting against wolves who want to return to the brutal ways of his father's reign." She paused. "Your presence here, an Omega with high status, is either proof that his vision works, or it is ammunition for his enemies to claim he has gone soft." "So I am a political liability," I said. "You are a test case." Mira said it bluntly. "If you succeed, if you prove that an Omega can have value beyond traditional roles, you strengthen every reform Kalen has implemented. If you fail, you give the old guard exactly what they need to challenge him. That is a tremendous amount of pressure for one Omega to carry." "Yes," Mira agreed. "It is." She stood, smoothing her dress. "Which is why I am here to help you survive tonight. At dinner, sit where Kalen places you. Do not speak unless directly addressed. Do not rise to obvious provocations." Her eyes held mine. "And for the love of the old gods, do not show weakness. These wolves will test you with questions, with subtle insults, with challenges designed to make you fail. Your job is to remain calm, answer honestly, and remember that you have already earned your place here." "Have I, though?" I asked quietly. Mira studied me for a long moment. "You opened your door to dying wolves when you had every reason to let them die. You risked your life for strangers. You showed compassion when survival instinct should have made you cruel." She paused. "I do not understand it, but I respect it. And if you can show even half that courage tonight, you will be fine." It was the closest thing to approval I had gotten from anyone except Kalen and Ronan. "Thank you," I said. "Do not thank me yet." Mira moved to the door. "Come, it is time." She paused, her hand on the handle. "And Alara, remember that you are not just representing yourself tonight. You are representing every Omega who has ever been told they are worthless. Do not let them down." The weight of that responsibility settled over me, like a physical thing, as I followed her out into the corridor. The dining hall was intimate in a way that made it more intimidating, not less. A single long table dominated the space, carved from dark wood and polished to a mirror shine. Candles flickered in silver holders, casting dancing shadows on stone walls hung with tapestries depicting wolves in various stages of triumph. 20 chairs surrounded the table. 17 of them were already occupied when Mira led me through the door. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned to me. I felt their assessment like physical touch, taking in my dress, my posture, the way I carried myself, looking for weakness, looking for proof that I did not belong here. Kalen sat at the head of the table. When his silver eyes met mine, something in my chest loosened slightly. He stood, and the gesture forced everyone else to stand as well. A subtle demonstration of power that was not lost on anyone present. Counselors, honored guests. His voice carried effortlessly through the space. "May I present Alara, healer to the inner pack and newest member of our court." He gestured to the empty chair at his right hand. the position of highest honor, traditionally reserved for his second or his most trusted advisor. Placing me there was a statement, a declaration that I held value in his eyes. It also painted a target on my back. I crossed to the chair with my head high, very aware of the weight of every gaze following my movement. Kalen held the chair for me, another deliberate gesture of respect, before reclaiming his own seat. The others settled back into their places with varying degrees of grace, and I could practically feel the speculation crackling through the air. "Let me make introductions," Kalen said smoothly. He began around the table, naming advisors and council members whose titles blurred together in my anxious mind. Military commanders, trade negotiators, territory representatives, all of them powerful, all of them watching me with expressions that ranged from curious to openly hostile. I noticed the way Mira watched Kalen throughout the introductions. Her green eyes followed his movements with an attention that went beyond the concern of an advisor for her king. There was something almost maternal in her gaze, a fierce protectiveness that spoke of years of shared history. When Kalen laughed at something Ronan said, Mira's expression softened in a way that reminded me of my own mother. The comparison startled me. Whatever bound Mira to the Alpha King, it was not merely politics. The last introduction made my stomach drop. And finally, our guest from the Eastern Pack, Alpha Victor, here to discuss trade agreements between our territories. The man at the far end of the table was perhaps 50, with silver threading through dark hair and eyes that assessed me with the cold calculation of a predator evaluating prey. He wore the green and gold of the Eastern Pack, and something about the way he looked at me made my skin crawl. But it was not just contempt I saw in his face. There was something else underneath, something that looked almost like pain, badly hidden beneath a mask of aristocratic disdain. An Omega healer. Victor's voice was smooth as poisoned honey. "How progressive of you, Alpha King. Though I confess I am surprised to see one seated at your council table. In the Eastern Territories, we find Omegas serve the pack better in more traditional roles." The challenge was immediate and unmistakable. "In the Northern Pack," Kalen replied, his tone perfectly pleasant and absolutely deadly, "we find that competence matters more than tradition. Alara saved 25 of my inner pack during the recent blizzard. That alone has earned her a place at this table." Victor's cold eyes swept the table, searching for weakness the way a predator scans for injured prey. His gaze lingered on me longer than necessary, and I felt the weight of calculation behind his stare. "Tell me, little Omega," he said, his voice deceptively casual. "How does one survive alone on the borderlands for so many years? It must require considerable resourcefulness." The question seemed innocent enough, but I could feel the trap hidden beneath the words. "I learned to be useful," I replied carefully. "People tolerate what they find valuable." "Indeed." Victor's smile did not reach his eyes. "And now you have made yourself valuable to the Alpha King himself. Quite the achievement for someone born without a wolf." Kalen's hand tightened on his goblet, but his voice remained steady. "Alara's value speaks for itself, Victor. Perhaps we should discuss the trade agreements you came here to negotiate, rather than interrogating my healer." The redirect was smooth but firm. Victor inclined his head in acknowledgement, but his eyes promised that our conversation was not finished. Servants entered with the first course, and the conversation shifted to safer topics. Weather, hunting, territory news. But I could feel the undercurrent of tension, could sense the way certain wolves around the table were evaluating me, measuring me, deciding whether I was an asset or a liability to their king. I ate mechanically, hyper-aware of every movement and every word. Beside me, Kalen maintained easy conversation with the counselors, but I noticed how he subtly redirected any questions that might put me on the spot, how he kept the focus on pack business rather than on me personally. He was protecting me. Again. And I was not sure how I felt about that. When the meal finally ended and the wolves began to disperse, Victor caught my arm in the corridor. "A word, little Omega." His grip was firm but not painful. His eyes, when I looked into them, held something unexpected. Not just the cold calculation I had seen at dinner. Something else. Something that looked almost like desperation. "What do you want?" I asked. "To give you a warning." He glanced around, ensuring we were not overheard. "Kalen is building something fragile here. His reforms, his progressive ideals, they make enemies. Powerful enemies who would see everything he has built torn down." He leaned closer. "You think you are safe here. You think he values you for your skills, your compassion. But in the games of power, everyone is expendable. Everyone." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because you saved wolves who would have died." Something flickered in his eyes. That pain I had glimpsed earlier, rising to the surface for just a moment before he pushed it down again. "My daughter was killed by rebels 3 years ago. They tortured her, made me watch, and the Northern Pact's response was negotiation, diplomacy." While my child screamed, his voice cracked. "I know what it means to have someone show mercy when they could have chosen cruelty. You showed mercy to the Inner Pack. I am showing mercy to you now by warning you." He released my arm. "Be careful, little Omega. The wars being fought in this territory are not always visible, and the casualties are rarely the ones holding weapons." Then he was gone, disappearing down the corridor before I could respond. I stood there for a long moment, my mind racing. Victor's words echoed in my head, mixing with everything I had seen and heard since arriving at the keep. Was he right? Was I walking into something more dangerous than I understood? Or was Victor the one trying to manipulate me, using my inexperience and fear to turn me against the one person who had shown me genuine kindness? I did not know. I could not know. All I could do was watch and wait and try to figure out the truth before it destroyed me. The weeks that followed were the most challenging of my life. I threw myself into my work at the infirmary, organizing supplies, treating minor injuries, learning the rhythms of the keep. The healing facilities were better equipped than anything I had ever seen, with 3 assistant healers who regarded me with varying degrees of skepticism and curiosity. Garrett, the senior healer I had effectively replaced, was the most difficult. He was 60 years old, with silver hair and hands that trembled slightly when he worked. He had been the Pack's primary healer for 30 years, and my arrival had clearly wounded his pride. He watched me constantly, looking for mistakes, questioning my methods, challenging my decisions in front of patients. I bore it with as much grace as I could manage, remembering what Mira had told me about the importance of not showing weakness. But I also made an effort to understand him, to learn why he resented me so deeply. The breakthrough came 2 weeks after my arrival, when I found him alone in the supply room, struggling to thread a needle for a delicate procedure. His hands were shaking badly, and frustration was written across his weathered face. "I could help with that," I said quietly. He looked up, startled. For a moment, I expected him to refuse, to tell me he did not need assistance from an Omega who had stolen his position. Instead, he sighed. 30 years, he said. 30 years I have served this pack. I stitched Kalen's wounds when he was a child. I saved his life when his father beat him so badly he nearly died. He looked down at his trembling hands. And now my own body betrays me. I cannot do the work anymore. I cannot be what they need. I pulled a chair over and sat across from him. "I am not here to replace you," I said. "I am here to help. You have 30 years of knowledge I could not hope to match. Your hands may shake, but your mind is still sharp." I took the needle from his fingers and threaded it easily. "Teach me what you know. Let me be your hands when you need them. We can work together, Garrett. We do not have to be enemies." He stared at me for a long moment. Then slowly, something in his expression shifted. "You really mean that," he said. "You are not just saying what you think I want to hear." "I never say what people want to hear," I replied. "I have not got the political skill for it." A surprised laugh escaped him. "No, I suppose you have not." He was silent for a moment, considering. "Very well, little Omega. Show me what you can do, and I will show you what I know. It was not friendship, not yet. But it was a start. A shadow fell across my workspace later that day. I looked up to find Finn hovering in the doorway, his young face alight with curiosity. Finn was the youngest of the Inner Pack, barely 22, with bright eyes and an enthusiasm that seemed almost out of place among the battle-hardened warriors. He had attached himself to me since the first day, following me around the infirmary with an endless stream of questions. "Is it true that feverfew can cure headaches?" he asked, peering at the herbs I was sorting, "and that willow bark reduces fever, and that there is a plant that can make people tell the truth?" "Feverfew and willow bark, yes," I said, fighting a smile. "The truth plant is a myth." His face fell. "But the songs all say. The songs lie about many things, Finn. That is what makes them entertaining." He considered this for a moment. "What about the one that says, 'A healer's touch can mend a broken heart'? That is definitely a myth." "Are you certain?" he pressed. "Because Ronan says the Alpha King has been in a much better mood since you arrived, and that seems like evidence of—" "Finn," I interrupted, "I have work to do." He grinned, entirely unrepentant. "I will come back later with more questions," he promised. "I am compiling a list." "Of course you are." He bounded away, and I found myself smiling despite my exasperation. There was something refreshing about Finn's unguarded enthusiasm. In a court full of calculation and hidden agendas, his transparency was almost disarming. Marcus, the 50-year-old inner pack member who had served as a general in his younger days, was another unexpected ally. He had been present when I saved the inner pack during the blizzard, and he had watched my actions with the critical eye of a military strategist. "You have good instincts," he told me one afternoon when I was checking on his healing shoulder wound. "Tactical instincts. The way you positioned your shelter, the way you triaged the wounded, the way you used limited resources to maximum effect. I never thought of it as tactical," I admitted. "I was just trying to keep everyone alive." "That is tactics," he replied. "Making quick decisions under pressure, prioritizing objectives, adapting to changing circumstances." He studied me with shrewd eyes. "How would you like to learn more? Not about healing, you already know that. About strategy, about reading situations, about understanding the games being played around you." "Why would you offer that?" I asked. "Because you saved my life. Because Kaelin sees something in you worth protecting, and because I think you are going to need every advantage you can get if you want to survive in this court." So I began spending my evenings with Marcus, studying maps of the territories, learning about the political factions within the pack, understanding the complex web of alliances and enmities that defined life at the Northern Keep. "The rebels in the south," he explained one night, pointing to positions on a detailed map. "They are not just random malcontents. They are organized, well-funded, led by wolves who know exactly what they are doing. Who is leading them?" I asked. "That is what we are trying to find out. Our intelligence suggests there is someone coordinating their efforts, someone with resources and connections that ordinary rebels would not have." He traced a line across the map. "The attack that wounded the inner pack was not a chance encounter. They knew exactly where we would be and when. They had reinforcements waiting. If not for the blizzard, if not for you, they would have succeeded in killing every one of us. A coordinated assassination attempt," I said slowly. "Targeting Kaelin's most trusted warriors, and through them, Kaelin himself," Marcus confirmed. "The Alpha King's power rests on loyalty. Destroy his inner pack, destroy the wolves who would die for him without question, and you weaken him beyond repair." The implications made my blood run cold. "Then I did not just save injured wolves," I said. "I disrupted an assassination plot." Without even knowing it, Marcus agreed. "Which is why some people in this keep are very grateful to you, and why others are very concerned about your presence." He leaned back in his chair. "You are a wild card, Alara. No one knows what to make of you. And in political games, wild cards are dangerous." The weeks continued to pass. I settled into a routine, dividing my time between the infirmary, my lessons with Marcus, and the occasional formal dinner where I had to navigate the treacherous waters of court politics. Aldrich, the senior counselor who had been second to Kaelin's father, was my most persistent enemy. He challenged every decision I made, questioned every action I took, used every opportunity to suggest that my presence was undermining pack stability. But I noticed something about his opposition. It was not merely personal animosity. There was fear underneath his hostility, a genuine conviction that the reforms Kaelin had implemented were leading the pack toward disaster. I learned why from Mira during one of our increasingly regular conversations. Aldrich lost his wife and son during the Civil War, she told me, 20 years ago, when Kalen's father first attempted reforms similar to the ones Kalen is implementing now. She paused, her green eyes distant. The reforms failed. The traditionalists rose up. Thousands of wolves died in the conflict. Aldrich's family was among them. So he believes that reform leads to chaos, I said slowly. That Kalen is repeating his father's mistakes. He believes he is protecting the pack, Mira confirmed. In his mind, opposing you is not cruelty. It is duty. Understanding my enemy did not make dealing with him any easier, but it did help me approach his challenges with something other than defensive anger. Then came the council session that changed everything. It began as routine, a discussion of supply chains, a review of Border Patrol reports, a tedious debate about fishing rights in the northern rivers. I sat quietly in my assigned seat, taking notes and offering input only when directly asked about medical matters. Then Aldrich stood. "I wish to raise a matter of pack security," he announced. His voice was steady, but I could see tension in the set of his shoulders. "It concerns the Omega healer." My stomach dropped. Kalen's expression remained neutral. "Continue," he said. "It has come to my attention that the Omega has been receiving tactical training from Marcus. She has been given access to maps of our territories, information about our troop movements, details of our defensive strategies." Aldrich looked directly at me. I am forced to wonder why a healer needs such knowledge, and what she intends to do with it. The room went very quiet. "I was teaching her situational awareness," Marcus said evenly, "so that she could better serve the pack in times of crisis. Or so that she could pass information to our enemies," Aldrich countered. "We know nothing about this Omega's true loyalties. We know only that she appeared conveniently in the path of our wounded inner pack, with exactly the skills needed to save them." He turned to face the council. "In times of war, such a person is either an invaluable asset or an existential threat. I am asking the council to determine which." "You are suggesting I am a spy," I said, my voice tight with controlled anger. "I am suggesting we cannot rule out the possibility," Aldrich replied. "You have been given unprecedented access to this keep, to its resources, to its leaders. You answer only to the Alpha King. And you came to us from nowhere, with no pack, no family, no one to vouch for your character." His eyes were cold. In times of war, such a person requires scrutiny. Silence fell over the room. I looked at Kalen, expecting him to defend me as he had before, but his expression was unreadable. He was watching me, not Aldrich, waiting to see what I would do. And I realized with a jolt of understanding that this was a test, not from Aldrich, but from Kalen himself. He wanted to see how I would handle the accusation, whether I would wait for him to rescue me or whether I would stand on my own. I rose to my feet. "You want to question my loyalty?" I said, and my voice came out stronger than I expected. "Then question it. Ask me anything. I have nothing to hide." Aldrich's eyes narrowed. "Very well. Where were you born?" "The Borderlands settlement. Eastern edge of the territory." "Your parents?" "My mother was a healer. She died 8 years ago. My father is alive, but he disowned me when I failed to manifest a wolf." "Why do you live alone?" "Because I have no pack, no family who will claim me. I built my shelter myself because no one would give me a place among them." I met Aldrich's gaze directly. "I am not a spy. I am not a rebel sympathizer. I am an Omega who was born without the ability to shift, who was thrown away by everyone who should have protected her, who spent years learning to survive on her own because she had no other choice." My voice cracked slightly. "I saved the inner pack because they were dying outside my door. Not because of politics or conspiracy or any grand plan, because I could not stand there and watch them freeze to death when I had the power to help. If that makes me suspicious, then I do not know what you want from me." The room was silent. Then Garrett stood. "I have worked with this Omega for weeks," he said, his voice rough. "I have watched her heal wounds I could not treat. I have seen her hold the hands of dying wolves and refuse to give up, even when there was no hope." He looked around the council table. "She is not a spy. She is a healer, and she is exactly what this pack needs." The support was unexpected. Garrett had resented me since my arrival, but apparently our truce in the supply room had meant more to him than I realized. Marcus stood next. "I have trained this Omega in tactics and strategy, not because she asked, but because I believed she would need the knowledge to protect herself in this court." He looked at Aldrich. "She has shown me nothing but dedication to this pack, nothing but commitment to her role as healer. If she is a spy, she is the worst one I have ever seen, because she has passed up countless opportunities to gather intelligence and instead spent her time saving lives." More wolves stood. Ronan, several members of the inner pack I had treated, even Mira, who had been so skeptical at the beginning. Aldrich looked around the room, seeing his accusations crumbling. "This proves nothing," he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "A clever spy would cultivate exactly this kind of support." "Enough!" Kalen's voice cut through the room. He stood, and the authority he radiated made everyone else seem small by comparison. "Ilara has been accused without evidence and defended by wolves who know her character. This council will not pursue baseless suspicions simply because some of us are uncomfortable with change." His silver eyes swept the table. "The matter is closed. Any further accusations against my healer will require concrete proof, not speculation and fear." He looked at me, and something passed between us that I could not name. "You may sit down, Ilara." I sat. My legs were trembling, but I had survived. I had defended myself without waiting to be rescued. The accusations echoed in my mind as I walked back to my quarters. Spy, liability, convenient coincidence. The words stung not because they were true, but because they reminded me of every dismissal I had faced before coming here. But I was tired of questioning myself, tired of waiting for permission to exist. I had spent 23 years letting other people's doubts become my own, and where had it gotten me? Alone, invisible, surviving instead of living. Maybe the council was right to be suspicious. Maybe I would never fully earn their trust. But I had earned my place here through actions, not politics, and I would not apologize for that. The night after the council session, I could not sleep. I sat by the window in my quarters, watching the moon track across the sky and replaying every word that had been spoken. Aldrich's accusations, Garrett's defense, the look in Kalen's eyes when I stood up for myself. A knock at my door startled me from my thoughts. "Come in!" I called, expecting Mira or perhaps one of the servants. Kalen entered instead. He was dressed simply, without the formal armor and insignia he usually wore. Just dark clothing and that ever-present intensity in his silver eyes. "You should be sleeping," he said. "So should you." He smiled slightly and moved to stand by the window, looking out at the same view I had been contemplating. "You did well today," he said. "In the council. You defended yourself without my help. Is that what you wanted? For me to prove I could stand on my own?" "Partly." He turned to face me. "But also because I wanted them to see what I see, that you are stronger than anyone gives you credit for, that you belong here despite what tradition says. Why does it matter so much to you?" I asked. "What the council thinks, what anyone thinks. You are the Alpha King. You could simply command them to accept me." "I could," he agreed, "and they would obey. But obedience born of fear is brittle. It breaks the moment the fear is removed." He sat in the chair across from me, his expression thoughtful. "I want them to accept you because they see your value, because they understand what you bring to this pack. That kind of acceptance cannot be commanded. It has to be earned." "The way you earned your position," I said slowly, "after you took power." His jaw tightened slightly, but he nodded. "My father was not the man most wolves believed him to be." His voice was flat with old pain. "He ruled through cruelty, through fear. He hurt those who could not fight back, and he called it strength." He paused. "When I ended his reign, I swore I would build something different, a pack where power served the people, not the other way around." His hands clenched into fists. "But some still remember my father fondly. They see his brutality as necessary. They see my reforms as weakness, and they wait for any opportunity to prove me wrong." The weight of his words settled over me. He was not just a king. He was a man fighting against his own legacy, trying to build something better from the wreckage of his father's cruelty. "That is why you need me," I said slowly, "not just as a healer, as proof that your vision works." "Partly," he admitted, "but also because you are exactly what this pack needs, someone who acts on compassion, someone who sees value in those others dismiss." He met my gaze. "And because you make me believe that maybe, after everything, I can still be something other than my father's son." The vulnerability in his words caught me off guard. This powerful alpha, this king who commanded hundreds of wolves, was showing me something he rarely let anyone see. "You are not your father," I said quietly. "You never were." His smile was sad. "Some days I am not so certain. Then let me be certain for you." I reached out and took his hand. The touch was simple, but it sent warmth spreading through my chest. "I have seen cruelty, Kaylin. I have lived with it my entire life, and I know the difference between a man who hurts others because he can and a man who carries the weight of his choices because he cares. You are not cruel. You are not your father. You are the Alpha King who freed slaves and knelt in the snow for a broken Omega." His hand tightened on mine. "Elara, I know this is complicated," I said quickly. "I know there are politics and expectations and 100 reasons why this cannot be anything more than what it is. But I want you to know that I see you, not the crown or the power or the legacy, just you." He was silent for a long moment, his silver eyes searching my face. "That courage," he said quietly, "that willingness to see past what everyone else sees, that is what makes you extraordinary." He lifted our joined hands and pressed his lips to my knuckles. The gesture was gentle, almost reverent. "I do not know what this is," he continued, "or what it might become. But I know that I have spent 15 years building something I believed in, and for the first time, I have found someone who believes in it too." He released my hand and stood. "Get some sleep, Elara. Tomorrow is a new day." He paused at the door. "And thank you for seeing me, for being exactly who you are." Then he was gone, leaving me alone with my racing heart and the echo of his words. I did not sleep that night. But when dawn came, I faced it with something new burning in my chest. A determination I had not felt before, a sense of purpose that went beyond simply surviving. Kaylin was fighting for something worth believing in. A world where Omegas like me were not property. A pack where strength came from loyalty rather than fear. A future where the brutal hierarchy of the old ways gave way to something better. And for the first time in my life, I had the chance to be part of that fight. I would not waste it. The 3 weeks following Kaylin's midnight visit passed in a rhythm I had never known before. We did not speak of what had happened again, not directly. The moment hung between us like morning mist, acknowledged but untouched, waiting for the right time to take solid form. But something had shifted. Kaylin found reasons to visit the infirmary each day. Sometimes he came with minor injuries that did not require the Alpha King's personal attention. Sometimes he simply appeared at my door with questions about herb cultivation or wound treatment that we both knew he could have asked anyone. I never turned him away. In the evenings, we walked together on the eastern balcony. He told me about the territories, about the delicate web of alliances that held the 5 packs together, about the dreams he had for the future. I told him about my mother, about the years I had spent learning to survive, about the small victories that had kept me going when everything else seemed hopeless. We learned each other's silences, the way he grew quiet when memories of his father surfaced, the way I looked away when I spoke of the family that had discarded me. We did not try to fix each other's wounds. We simply sat with them, acknowledging that some scars never fully heal. Ronan watched our growing closeness with amusement that he did not bother to hide. "The Alpha King has smiled more in the past 3 weeks than in the past 3 years, he told me one morning. "Whatever you are doing, keep doing it." "I am not doing anything," I protested. Ronan just laughed. I should have known that such peace could not last. I should have remembered that the world does not stop turning simply because 2 people find comfort in each other's company. But I was happy. For the first time in my life, I was genuinely, completely happy. And then the warning came. The messenger arrived at dawn, his wolf form streaked with mud and blood, his eyes wild with exhaustion and fear. I was in the infirmary, checking on a young wolf who had broken his leg during training exercises, when Ronan burst through the doors. His face was pale beneath the scar that crossed his cheekbone, and his gray eyes held a wildness I had never seen before. "Council chamber," he said. "Now!" "What is happening?" I asked, already setting down my supplies. "War." The single word struck me like a physical blow. I followed him through the corridors of the keep, my heart pounding against my ribs as we climbed the stairs to the council chamber. Wolves were running in all directions, their expressions tense with barely contained panic. The entire fortress had transformed from a place of guarded peace to a hive of urgent activity. The council chamber was already full when we arrived. Every senior advisor was present, along with the commanders of the various military units. Maps had been spread across the central table, and Kalen stood at the head, his silver eyes scanning the documents with intense focus. He looked up when I entered, and something in his expression softened for just a moment before hardening again. "Elara, good. You need to hear this." I took my place beside Ronan, very aware of the tension crackling through the room like lightning before a storm. "Report!" Kalen commanded. Marcus stepped forward, his weathered face grim. "Our scouts have confirmed the worst. The Southern Rebellion has mobilized. 3,000 wolves moving north through the mountain passes. They will reach our territory within 2 days. 3,000. The number echoed in my mind. The northern pack had perhaps 2,000 warriors, and that was counting every wolf capable of fighting. We would be outnumbered. There is more," Marcus continued, and his voice carried a weight that made my stomach drop. "We have identified the leader of the rebellion." He looked at Kalen, and I saw something in his eyes that looked almost like pity. "It is Darius, Alpha, your brother." The silence that followed was absolute. I watched Kalen's face, saw the color drain from his skin, saw his hands clench into fists at his sides. For one terrible moment, I thought he might shatter, might collapse under the weight of this revelation. Then his expression hardened into something cold and controlled. "Explain," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Mira stepped forward. Her face was ashen, and her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. "Darius did not die 10 years ago," she said. "I helped him escape." The words fell like stones into still water, sending ripples of shock through the assembled wolves. "What?" Kalen breathed. Mira's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "After you took power, Darius was terrified. He was only 15. He had seen things no child should see, and he believed he was in danger." She paused, her voice breaking. "I could not let anything happen to him. He was just a child. So I arranged for him to be smuggled south, to a pack that owed me favors. I thought he would be safe there. I thought he would have a chance at a normal life." Her composure cracked. "I did not know he would spend the next decade building an army. I did not know he would return seeking vengeance for the past." "You lied to me," Kalen said. The words were flat, emotionless, but I could see the devastation behind his eyes. "You lied to me for 10 years. You let me believe my brother was dead. I was trying to protect him," Mira whispered. "I was trying to protect both of you, and instead you created the weapon that may destroy us all." The bitterness in his voice was sharp enough to cut. I wanted to go to him, wanted to offer some comfort, some support. But this was not the time, and the council chamber was not the place. All I could do was stand there and watch as the man I had come to care for processed the twin betrayals of his stepmother and his brother. "We do not have time for recriminations," Marcus said firmly. "The army is coming whether we like it or not. We need to prepare." Kalen closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them again, the Alpha King had returned. Whatever personal anguish he felt had been locked away, replaced by the cold calculation of a military commander. "What are our options?" he asked. Marcus pointed to the map. "The Pass of Shadows is our best defensive position. It is the only route through the mountains wide enough for an army of that size. If we can hold them there for 3 days, reinforcements from the Western Pack will arrive. And if we cannot hold," Kalen asked, "then they will be in the valley by nightfall, and the keep will be under siege within a week." Kalen studied the map, his silver eyes tracing the contours of the terrain. "How many wolves can we spare for the pass? 1,500 if we strip the border patrols. That leaves 500 to defend the keep." He nodded slowly. "Do it. I will lead the force at the pass myself." "Alpha," Ronan protested. "If you fall, the pack falls with you. If I hide in the keep while my wolves die in the mountains, I am not worthy of leading them," Kalen replied. "I will not ask anyone to face a danger I am not willing to face myself." His gaze swept the room. "Ronan, you will remain here with the reserve force. If the pass falls, you are to evacuate the non-combatants through the northern tunnels and lead the survivors to the western pack." "And what about me?" I asked. Every eye in the room turned to me. "You will stay here," Kalen said. "Set up a field hospital in the Great Hall. Prepare for casualties. Coordinate with Garrett and the other healers." He met my gaze, and I saw the fear he was trying to hide. Not fear for himself, fear for me. "If the keep is attacked, you are to evacuate with the others. Do not try to be a hero. Do not put yourself in danger. I will do what needs to be done," I said carefully. It was not agreement. We both knew it, but it was all I could offer. The next hours passed in a blur of preparation. I worked alongside Garrett and the other healers, transforming the Great Hall into a medical facility capable of treating hundreds of wounded. We gathered supplies, prepared beds, organized the equipment we would need for surgeries and emergency treatments. Finn appeared at my side as I finished preparing the surgical supplies. His usual brightness had dimmed, replaced by a tension I had never seen in him before. "I am supposed to protect you," he said. "Ronan's orders." I looked at him, really looked. Beneath the boyish features and eager disposition, there was steel, the same steel I had seen in every member of the inner pack. "How old were you when you joined?" I asked. 18. "Youngest ever accepted." He said it without pride, merely stating a fact. "I grew up in a border village," he continued. "Raiders attacked when I was 16, killed my parents, my sister, everyone I knew." His jaw tightened. Kalen's forces arrived too late to save them, but they found me in the ruins, half dead, surrounded by the bodies of 6 raiders I had killed with my bare hands. I stared at him. The cheerful young wolf who asked about mythical truth plants had slaughtered 6 enemies at 16 years old. "Kalen offered me a choice," Finn said. "I could go to one of the refugee settlements and try to build a new life, or I could channel my anger into something useful." He met my eyes. I chose useful, and I have never regretted it. "I am sorry," I said quietly. "About your family. Do not be." His smile returned, but it was different now, sharper, more real. They died because no one was there to protect them. I became inner pack, so that I could be there for others. He drew his sword, testing its weight. "So when I say I am going to protect you, little healer, I mean it. Anyone who wants to hurt you will have to go through me first." For the first time since the news of war had arrived, I felt something other than fear. I felt protected. The army departed at noon. I stood on the walls of the keep with the other non-combatants, watching as 1,500 wolves marched through the gates and into the mountains. Kalen led them, his black wolf form visible at the head of the column, moving with the confident grace of a born predator. He had not said goodbye. There had been no time for personal moments, no opportunity for the words that hung unspoken between us. He had simply looked at me once across the chaos of the courtyard and nodded. It would have to be enough. The waiting was the worst part. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. I kept myself busy in the medical facility, checking and rechecking supplies, reviewing procedures with the other healers, doing everything I could to prepare for the wounded that would soon arrive. Reports came sporadically from the pass. The armies had engaged. Fighting was fierce. Casualties were mounting on both sides. And then, just as the sun was beginning to set, a different kind of message arrived. A wolf I did not recognize burst into the great hall, his eyes wild with panic. "Eastern Pack forces," he gasped. 200 wolves. They have been sighted approaching from the east." My blood ran cold. "Victor." Ronan materialized beside me, his face grim. "It is a trap," he said. "Victor never intended to negotiate trade agreements. He has been working with the rebellion all along." He turned to the assembled guards. Battle positions. They will hit the eastern wall first. We need to hold until... Until what? Someone asked. Help is not coming. The Alpha King is at the pass. The Western Pack is days away. Then we hold until we cannot hold anymore, Ronan said, and we make them pay for every inch of ground they take. He looked at me. Get to the tunnels. Take the healers and the non-combatants and... No. The word came out before I could stop it. I am not running, I said. These people need medical care. If the wounded start arriving from the pass and there are no healers here. There will not be any wounded if the keep falls, Ronan interrupted. Then we make sure it does not fall. I met his eyes steadily. I have studied the defensive positions with Marcus. I know this keep's strengths and weaknesses, and I know that if Victor's forces breach the walls, they will head straight for the medical facility because that is where they expect to find the most vulnerable targets. I paused. They expect to find helpless Omegas waiting to be captured. Let us give them something else instead. Ronan stared at me for a long moment. Then slowly, a fierce grin spread across his scarred face. Marcus was right about you, he said. You are dangerous. He turned to the guards. New plan. We fortify the Great Hall, make it the center of our defense. If they want our healer, they will have to go through all of us to get her. The next hours were chaos. I helped organize the defense, drawing on everything Marcus had taught me about tactics and terrain. The Great Hall had 2 entrances, both of which could be barricaded. The high windows provided sightlines for archers. The stone walls were thick enough to withstand considerable assault. We moved the non-combatants to the northern wing of the keep, where the evacuation tunnels offered an escape route if everything went wrong. But I refused to go with them. This is where I am needed, I told Garrett when he tried to convince me to leave. This is where I can do the most good. You are going to get yourself killed, he said. Then I will die doing something that matters. He looked at me for a long moment, his old eyes filled with something that might have been respect. Then he picked up a surgical knife and tested its edge. I did not survive 30 years as a healer by being unable to defend myself, he said. If they come for you, they will have to go through me as well. The attack came at midnight. Victor's forces hit the eastern wall with overwhelming force, their howls splitting the night air as they scaled the ancient stones. Our defenders fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. Within an hour, the outer defenses had fallen. They are in the keep, Finn reported, racing into the Great Hall. They are moving through the corridors, heading this way. How many? Ronan asked. At least 100. Ronan drew his sword. Then we give them a fight they will never forget. The barricades held longer than I expected. The wolves who had remained to defend the keep fought with desperate courage, knowing that everything they loved was at stake. But Victor's forces were fresh and determined, and gradually they began to break through. I stayed in the center of the hall, treating the wounded who were carried in from the fighting. Burns from torches, slashes from claws, puncture wounds from blades. I worked with steady hands even as the sounds of battle grew closer and closer. And then the main doors burst open. Victor strode through the wreckage, flanked by a dozen of his finest warriors. His eyes swept the hall until they found me. "Little Omega," he said, and his smile was cold as winter. "We meet again." Ronan moved to stand between us, his sword raised. "You will not touch her. I have no intention of harming her," Victor replied. "She is far too valuable for that." He looked at me directly. "You saved wolves who would have died. You showed mercy when you could have chosen survival. I told you then that I was returning the favor." He spread his hands. "This is your chance, little Omega. Come with me willingly and no one else has to die. Refuse and I will kill everyone in this hall before I drag you away." "You want to use me against Kalen," I said. "I want to end this war," Victor corrected. "Your Alpha King cares for you. Even I could see that. If I have you, he will negotiate. He will surrender. And the bloodshed will stop." "The bloodshed he started, you mean?" Victor's expression flickered. "The bloodshed that killed my daughter, that destroyed everything I loved, that has consumed this land for far too long." He stepped closer. "I do not expect you to understand. You are young. You have not yet learned how grief can twist a person, how loss can drive you to actions you never imagined yourself capable of. But I am offering you a choice, little Omega. A real one. Come with me and save the lives of everyone in this hall, or refuse and watch them die before your eyes." I looked around at the wolves who had stayed to defend me. Ronan, bleeding from a wound on his shoulder but still standing. Garrett, clutching his surgical knife with trembling hands. Finn, barely more than a boy, his eyes wide with fear but his jaw set with determination. They would die for me, all of them, and Victor would kill them without hesitation. "If I go with you," I said slowly, "you will let them live. All of them. Every one. And you will not harm me." Victor inclined his head. "You are no good to me damaged. Kalen will not negotiate for a corpse." I looked at Ronan, saw the protest forming on his lips. "Take care of them," I said quietly. "When Kalen returns, tell him." I hesitated. Tell him I did what I had to do. Tell him I chose to save lives instead of watching them end. "Alara, no," Ronan started. But I was already walking forward, already moving toward Victor and his warriors, already surrendering myself to save the wolves who had become my family. Victor smiled. "Wise choice, little Omega." He reached for my arm, and that was when the main doors exploded inward. Kalen came through the wreckage like vengeance incarnate, his black wolf form streaked with blood from a dozen wounds, his silver eyes blazing with fury that seemed to light the entire hall. Behind him came the survivors of the pass, warriors who had fought their way through the rebel army and raced home when word reached them of Victor's treachery. The battle that followed was brief and brutal. Victor's forces, caught between the returning army and the defenders of the hall, crumbled within minutes. The Eastern Alpha himself tried to flee, only to find Ronan blocking his path, sword raised and scarred face twisted with savage satisfaction. Kalen shifted to human form as he approached me. His body was covered in blood, some of it his own, and exhaustion lined every feature of his face. But his eyes were bright with relief as he pulled me into his arms. "I thought I had lost you." His voice was raw, broken in ways I had never heard before. He held me like I might disappear if he let go, his arms trembling with exhaustion and relief. When word reached us that Victor had attacked the keep, he continued, "I thought I was too late. I thought." He stopped, unable to finish. "I am here," I said, pressing closer. "I am alive. I was trying to protect them. I was going to go with Victor to save." "I know." He pulled back slightly, cupping my face in his hands. His silver eyes were bright with unshed tears. "That courage," he said quietly, "that willingness to sacrifice yourself for others, that is what makes you extraordinary, Alara. That is what I—" He stopped himself, something shifting in his expression. Whatever he had been about to say, he was not ready to say it. Not yet. Not in the chaos of a battlefield with wounded wolves crying out around us. "We will talk," he said instead. "When this is over, when there is time." He pressed his forehead to mine. "But right now there are wounded who need you, and I need to secure the keep. Go," I said. "I will be here when you return." He released me reluctantly and turned to rejoin his warriors, but at the door he paused and looked back. "Alara." "Yes, thank you. For surviving, for being exactly who you are." Then he was gone, and I returned to my work with something warm glowing in my chest. We had not spoken the words, but we both knew they were coming. Some things were worth waiting for. The aftermath of the battle stretched through the night and into the following days. Victor was taken prisoner, his forces scattered or captured. Word came from the pass that the rebel army had broken when they learned of Victor's defeat, their coordination shattered by the loss of their eastern allies. Darius had escaped into the mountains, but his power was broken, his dreams of conquest destroyed. The northern pack had survived, but survival came with a cost. I worked without rest for 2 days, treating the wounded, easing the pain of the dying, doing everything I could to save the wolves who had fought to protect the keep. Garrett worked beside me, his old hands steady despite his exhaustion, his gruff voice offering comfort to patients who were too far gone for medicine to help. On the 3rd day, Kalen came to the medical facility. He looked better than he had during the battle. His wounds had been treated, and he had finally slept for a few hours. But there were shadows in his silver eyes that had not been there before. "Walk with me," he said. I handed my current patient to one of the assistant healers and followed him out of the hall. We walked in silence through the corridors of the keep, past the damage from the battle, past the wolves who were already beginning the work of repair and recovery. Finally, we emerged onto a balcony overlooking the eastern mountains. The sun was setting, painting the peaks in shades of gold and crimson that reminded me of blood and fire. "Darius," Kaylin said quietly, "I need to tell you about Darius." I waited. He was 15 when I took power. I was 23. He worshipped our father, saw him as a god, as the perfect alpha, as everything a leader should be. Kaylin's voice was rough with old pain. He did not know what father really was. I had protected him from the truth, made sure he never saw the worst of what happened in this keep. I wanted him to have an innocent childhood, the kind I never had. He turned to face me. When I ended our father's reign, Darius saw only the violence. He did not know the reasons. He did not understand what I was protecting him from. "And Mira helped him escape," I said. "She thought she was protecting him, and perhaps she was. A 15-year-old who had witnessed something traumatic, staying in a keep full of wolves who supported what I had done. He would not have survived." Kaylin was silent for a moment, but instead of finding peace in the South, he found people who told him what he wanted to hear. That I was a monster, that our father was a great man brought low by treachery, that the only way to honor his memory was to destroy everything I had built. He shook his head. 10 years. He spent 10 years building an army, nursing his hatred, planning his revenge, and I had no idea he was even alive. "What will you do with him?" I asked, "if he is captured?" "I do not know," Kaylin admitted. "He is my brother, my blood. But he has also led a rebellion that killed hundreds of my wolves." He looked at me. "What would you do?" I considered the question carefully. "I would give him the truth," I said finally. "The truth you never gave him as a child. The truth about who your father really was. And if he does not believe it, then at least you will have tried. At least you will know that you did everything you could to save him." Kaylin was quiet for a long moment. "You see the best in people," he said finally. "Even people who do not deserve it." "I see the truth," I corrected, "and the truth is that Darius was a child who lost his father and was never told why. His anger is understandable, even if his actions are not." I took his hand. "You cannot undo the past. You cannot change what happened, but you can choose what happens next. And that choice matters more than anything that came before." Kaylin squeezed my hand. "How did you become so wise?" "I am not wise," I said. "I am just broken in ways that help me understand other broken people." "You are not broken, Alara." I smiled. "Maybe not anymore." We stood there as the sun set, watching the light fade from the mountains. And for the first time since the battle, I felt something like peace settling over me. The war was not over. Darius was still out there. The political situation was still complicated. There would be more challenges, more tests, more moments when everything hung in the balance, but I was no longer facing them alone. 6 months after I first walked through the gates of the northern keep, the world had transformed in ways I could never have predicted. The autumn winds carried the scent of change through the mountain passes, and the keep itself seemed to breathe differently now. The damage from Victor's attack had been repaired, stone by stone, until no trace of that terrible night remained. New fortifications rose along the eastern wall, stronger than before, a reminder that survival required constant vigilance. But it was not only the keep that had changed. Darius had been captured 3 months after the battle, found hiding in a remote village in the southern mountains. He had been brought to the keep in chains, expecting execution. Instead, Kaylin had given him the truth. I had watched through a window as the two brothers sat together in a small room, Kaylin speaking quietly while Darius listened with growing horror. The story of their father's true nature, the things Kaylin had witnessed, the reasons behind everything that had happened. Darius had wept. He had not been forgiven. His rebellion had cost too many lives for that. But he had been spared execution, sentenced instead to exile in the northern wastes, where he would have the chance to build something new if he chose to take it. "Maybe he will find redemption," Kaelin had said afterward. "Maybe he will die bitter and alone, but at least now he knows the truth. At least now the choice is his." Victor had not been so fortunate. His treachery had been too calculated, his actions too deliberate. He had been executed publicly. A message to any other would be traitors that betrayal carried a price. I had not watched. I had not wanted to see the end of a man whose pain I understood, even if I could not excuse what that pain had driven him to do. Now, as autumn painted the mountains in shades of gold and amber, I stood on the same balcony where Kaelin had told me about his brother. The view was familiar now. After 6 months, the keep had become my home in a way my old shelter never had. I heard footsteps behind me and smiled without turning. "You found me. You are always here at sunset," Kaelin said, coming to stand beside me. "I have learned your patterns." He took my hand, and the touch sent warmth spreading through my chest. 6 months, he said quietly. "It has been 6 months since you came here, since you agreed to give my vision a chance." "Has it?" I said, though of course I knew. I had been counting the days. "I asked you once," he continued, "if you wanted to explore what we could be. You told me to ask again in 6 months. He turned to face me, his silver eyes intense. "I am asking again, Alara. What do you want?" I had thought about this moment for months, had imagined all the things I might say, all the ways I might express the feelings that had grown inside me since that first night in the blizzard. But now, standing here with his hand in mine and his eyes on my face, all the carefully prepared words vanished. "My mother used to ask me a riddle," I said instead. "She asked it over and over, until it became a kind of game between us. What breaks when you speak its name?" Kaelin's brow furrowed. "I do not know." Neither did I, for a long time. I thought it must be something fragile, something delicate, something that could not survive the weight of attention. I stepped closer to him. "But the answer is nothing. Nothing breaks when you speak its name." Because the question is designed to make you think something is fragile, when really, the things that matter, the things that are truly valuable, those things do not break so easily. I reached up to cup his face. "I spent my entire life believing I was broken," I said, "that I was fragile, that I would shatter at a single hard word or a difficult moment. Kaelin, I am not broken. I never was. I am scarred. I am wounded. I have been through things that should have destroyed me, but I am still here, still standing, still fighting." His hands came up to cover mine. "I know," he said softly. "I have always known." "Then you know what I want," I said. "I want to stay. I want to build something with you. I want to spend the rest of my life proving that omegas are not worthless, that compassion is not weakness, that broken things can become beautiful if someone cares enough to see their value." I smiled. "I want you, Kaelin, not because you saved me, not because I owe you anything, but because you are the first person who ever saw me for who I really am and decided I was worth keeping. Alara." He pulled me closer, and I could feel his heart beating against my chest, strong and steady. "I love you," I said. "I have loved you for months. I was just too scared to say it." "I love you too," he whispered. "I have loved you since the moment you opened your door in that blizzard and decided that dying wolves were worth saving. Then stop talking," I said, "and kiss me." He did. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if he was afraid I might disappear if he held me too tightly. But then I pressed closer, and his arms wrapped around me, and the gentleness gave way to something fiercer and more demanding. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. "Was that worth waiting 6 months for?" Kaelin asked, his voice rough. I pretended to consider. "I suppose it was adequate." "Adequate." He laughed, and the sound was full of joy. "I will show you adequate," he said, and kissed me again. We stood there as the stars came out, wrapped in each other's arms, and I felt something I had never felt before. Peace, true peace. the kind that comes from knowing you are exactly where you are supposed to be, with exactly the person you are supposed to be with. The northern keep rose around us, solid and strong. Somewhere below, wolves were going about their evening routines, unaware that their alpha king was on a balcony, kissing the Omega healer who had stumbled into their lives on a winter night that seemed like a lifetime ago. I thought about everything that had happened since that night. The fear, the challenges, the battles, the moments when I had been certain I would not survive. And I thought about what I had gained: a home, a purpose, a family of wolves who had become as dear to me as blood. And love, real love, the kind that saw all your broken pieces and chose to stay anyway. "Kalen," I said, pulling back to look at him. "Yes, thank you." He raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For seeing me," I said simply. "For looking past everything the world said I was and finding something worth keeping." He smiled, and the expression made him look younger somehow. Less like the Alpha King, who carried the weight of thousands of lives on his shoulders. More like the man underneath, the one who had survived his own share of brokenness and come out the other side. "Thank you for opening your door," he replied, "for being brave enough to show compassion when survival would have been easier." He kissed my forehead. "Thank you for being you, Alara, exactly as you are, exactly as you have always been." I leaned into him, feeling his warmth, his strength, his steady heartbeat beneath my cheek. The war was over. The rebels were scattered. The future stretched before us, full of challenges and triumphs we could not yet imagine. But for now, in this moment, there was only this. Two broken people who had found each other in a storm. Two survivors who had learned that compassion was not weakness. Two hearts that beat in rhythm, promising a future neither had dared to dream of. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind moving through the mountains, carrying with it the howls of wolves greeting the rising moon. I am home, I thought. After 23 years of searching, I am finally home. And when Kalen's arms tightened around me, I knew that he felt it too. They said that kindness was a luxury and Omega could not afford. They were wrong. Kindness had saved 25 lives on a winter night. Kindness had opened doors that should have remained closed. Kindness had built bridges between broken people and shown them that healing was possible. And kindness had given me everything I never dared to want: a purpose, a family, a love that saw all my scars and chose to stay anyway. My name is Alara. I am the Omega who cannot shift. And for the first time in my life, I know exactly where I belong. Here, with him, forever.